Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Belly to Belly. And we're here today to talk about U.S. expansion, and we're with a great friend, Elias Ek from Enspyre. Welcome, Elias.
Hi and hello.
It's wonderful to see you. And as I mentioned, our audience are companies that are interested in expanding from wherever they are to the U.S. And Enspyre is doing lots of work in Taiwan, and you're helping a lot of Taiwan founders and also companies coming into Taiwan. But do you want to before we kind of hop into our topic, do you want to take a minute and talk about what Enspyre does to help companies?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm from Sweden originally. I went to the US to study and met the Taiwanese girl there, so I ended up in Taiwan. That was 25 years ago. And then 23 years ago, I founded Enspyre. Enspyre has, for the most of its history, we've been basically been the other way. We've been helping a lot of companies getting into Taiwan. It's kind of weird. I'm the foreigner living here in Taiwan that tend to help people getting into Taiwan. So we do that with lead generation services, phone answering services, consulting and so on. And I've also had a passion for a very long time to work with entrepreneurs. Of course, I am one myself, and especially with immigrant entrepreneurs here in Taiwan. So I wrote a book, for example, called How to Start a Business in Taiwan. And then for the last 10 years, I've been the co-organizer of an event called Dragon's Chamber, which is a pitch event specifically for immigrant entrepreneurs here in Taiwan. So I've seen, a lot of, both the large companies and the small companies and so on, to whether they want to come into Taiwan or they're talking about how they're going to take over the world.
World domination. That's a good plan. I like it.
Yeah.
So is having been in the Taiwan market for so many years and working with founders, as they look to expand out of Taiwan, where are they challenged? What are kind of the big areas that you see companies and founders challenges they look to expand beyond the borders?
So I think a lot of companies in Taiwan are honestly a little bit too humble. They tend to think they're not really sure if they really have what it takes. There are even founders whose English is good. They're tending to be a little bit hesitant about going into international markets. Things like that. If we're talking about like export-oriented companies, usually they hire on salespeople from Taiwan, and then they fly out to trade shows and so on. And the stereotypical Taiwanese booth, and I've seen so many of them over the years at the trade shows around the world, is a booth where you have a couple of salespeople sitting, preferably far into the booth somewhere, and they are kind of playing on their phone or looking at something and kind of avoiding to look at the customers walking by. If you stop by the booth and you're literally standing there waiting long enough, they will come out and talk to you and kind of try to exchange business cards with you. And then you kind of feel like, okay, once they've exchanged business cards, maybe it's time you can move on now. So now I've done my job. I can show my boss we got the card, and we can follow up afterwards. So a lot of Taiwanese people, they speak English, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are comfortable doing sales in English. And I feel like Taiwanese companies should invest more money into training for their international salespeople. And I think they should also very much be more open for hiring, people in market to help them to really expand.
Hmm. Well, it's interesting you say that, because in the U.S., and I'm seeing kind of a slow trend back now, but for many years, sales was kind of an evil word. There were very few kids coming out of college that aspired to be salespeople, or it to be in person. They wanted a digital. We'll connect with people via social media or or email, but the idea of sort of in-person interaction really was, I think, really difficult. So I'm not sure it's even here where we're speaking English, or in the UK where obviously they're speaking English. I'm not sure that it's necessarily any easier, or that people
Well, for sure,
gravitate to.
what you're pointing out, I totally agree with. I mean, obviously, there is a stigma with sales, right? The stereotypical, car salesman and so on is sticking out, and who likes a telemarketing phone call? Pretty much no one, right? Because again, the people making those phone calls are usually overworked and given horrible scripts and whatnot. But and I mean, these cases for sure, even if you're just saying like person to person interaction, but I mean, let's say people under 30 are not used to making phone calls.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I hear so many founders and managers that are saying like, well, I asked my salesperson if they had called such and such customer, and says, no, but I sent them a message. Well, call them now. Oh, okay. I'll send them a message first. You follow up the next day. So did you call that person? No, but I sent him, one message on LinkedIn and 2 emails, and he hasn't answered yet. And you're like, well,
yeah.
Well,
and you think of the power of a phone call. I mean, even if you get voicemail, you hear tone, you hear passion, which none of that comes through, unfortunately, when we send an email or a text or whatever. Yeah, I totally agree, and it's funny, and we're kind of diverting a bit here, but like even just leaving a voicemail, some people don't even do that, right? Even if they call, they just hang up if nobody answers, and as opposed to you've got this beautiful opportunity to leave a voicemail. But what do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I think in a lot of, I mean, these cases also, I think voicemails are not even necessarily part of the phone system that most people have anymore.
Mhm.
So yeah, even if you can leave a voice message, you often, I mean, yeah, people don't do it, but I think everything you're saying there, of course, is universal, and in every, today modern country, you have, this messaging preference. We have the habit of doing online meetings rather than going to see people and whatnot, which, yes, it has its benefit. We're saving on jet fuel and all of that stuff, but you can't beat face to face, really. But you take that and you're adding on the cultural issues, right? I mean, let's say you take an American who comes to Taiwan, they are just as likely to completely strike out when it comes to understanding how to do the sales here, right?
Sure.
I meet a lot of the immigrant entrepreneurs here who can't really understand why they can't make the sale, even though they don't speak Chinese and they don't really understand the culture and so on. So
can you talk about that? What's the difference? What's an effective, say, B2B sales process in Taiwan?
So interestingly, so companies that come into Taiwan, first of all, it does not matter what you have achieved in other countries. You have to have a local, case study. So as you coming into this country, the first thing you should do, even if you have to give away the service, the product for free, you have to get yourself a local case study, right? We were, for example, one of the world's largest CRM systems came into Taiwan about 15 years ago and something, and we worked on that. And yeah, like until we got them one of the top Taiwanese companies to use the CRM system for free, there was an absolute impossibility. So that's one thing. Another one is you have to have your materials in Chinese. Like, again, a lot of people here will read and write and speak English fine. They just don't want to, especially if they're being sold to, so you have to make sure that you localize all your content. And yes, I would say that you do need to have, somebody local that you can, rely on to actually go and talk to the customer. Like one of my oldest customers is Oracle. They have hundreds of people here in Taiwan. I'm sure pretty much all of them speak English, but all of our conversations are in Chinese.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I that makes so much sense. So, kind of a last question for you, Elias. So, when you think of all of the founders you've helped over time, and for a moment, think of the ones that have been most effective. What would you say are the sort of common traits of those founders?
I would say understanding that you can't be everything, right? Again, I hear people who say, well, I don't know how to speak English, or I don't know how to speak French and whatever. And I said, it doesn't matter. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't know how to speak every language in the world, but his company is certainly active everywhere. The job as an entrepreneur, the way I see it, is to put together the team, right? And whether we're talking about programming skills, sales skills, marketing skills, or whatever, you assemble that team. That team could be, employees, it could be co-founders, it could be vendors, right? But so I would say that the really successful entrepreneurs that I work with, they understand that. That's like, okay, it's all about huddling the team, however that looks, and letting them do the job.
That makes total sense. No, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time today and sharing your great wisdom with us.
Thank you very much for having me on.